And we are live.
Okay, welcome everybody to our City Council work session on 6 p.m. My apologies that my connection isn't good enough to maintain the video and audio, so we'll just have to not see my lovely face today. I'm sure you survive. We'll start off with roll call, and I'm going to go in order as you see you on my screen.
Wendy Huntley.
Sarah.
Sarah Hudson.
Gavin.
Gavin
I don't have audio. Yep. Thanks, Glenn.
Amy Patillo.
And Buck.
Buck Shapiro.
We also have our city secretary, Ashley, our city administrator, and our city attorney, Charlie Zeck, on with us. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm going to call up two on the regular agenda update process for changes in regulation, the zoning requirements for governmental institutional zoning, and the reason just for reminders for folks in our audience that are members are not allowed to discuss amongst themselves or between each other with each other, and that is why we're holding a council work session as your city council member to make sure that everyone is fully apprised. I guess everybody on the diocese of the details and really just assess regulations for in our process. Generally, that I'll open the up.
I think we might have lost him.
Yeah.
Amy. Oh, sorry. Can you guys?
I can jump in. Just as a procedural matter, is it okay if we take up items 2 and 3 together at the same time?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I asked for the work session, and I really appreciate everybody on the council taking the time for a work session. I know we all have a lot on our plates right now. Wanted to say that after some conversations with neighbors after the last council meeting, I found myself having kind of the same conversations over and over again and filling in a lot of gaps that I think really, when I look at them, a lot of them come from the fact that over the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of work has been done by the council. And so we don't always stop during council meetings to then give all of the history for the reasons that we're making decisions. And then I also did ask for the public comments to go at the end of the work session so that hopefully we can address some of the public comments that have come in as well. And then if there's additional comments, hear those, and it'd be another opportunity before the next council meeting to hear those. So I did ask for a broad agenda so that we could include a lot of these different plans and documents that the council has discussed in the past. And also, a lot of them are also available on the city website, but now they're all in one place in one packet as well for anyone in the public who wants to get them all in one place, things that have been referred to during the last council meeting discussion. And I would also note, I learned before the meeting that the HTML version, you can actually see each of the documents separated out, whereas in the PDF packet, if you download the whole PDF packet, it's a little bit more difficult to see where each of the different documents starts. So one of the things that I sent over and would propose is that there's a, I don't know if we've lost Gavin.
I'm still here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gavin. So one of the things that I put together just to maybe make our time more efficient, because it is a lot of content, is just a proposed flow of conversation that we could have to kind of review the question of how did we get here with even assessing 503 Vale Street, and kind of what are some things that are happening next in our city, and where could we go from there, just to be able to talk about a lot of the comments that have come in from the public. So I think Ashley, do you have that where you can put it up really quickly?
Amber has it. She's gonna get it.
Okay. Oh, Amber. Okay, great.
Yes.
Y'all see that?
Still loading.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so just to kind of a flow of the notes that I've put together to guide some discussion. This is the topics that they're under. Would be a quick briefing on the needs assessment that Brinkley Sargent did for us. I have a very quick briefing on that, and then to have discussion of the reasons that the City Council has been open to evaluating additional or alternative properties for housing, city admin, PD, and public works. Discussion of the reasons that we've been open to evaluating 503 Vale Street as an additional or alternative property, and then a discussion of resident feedback relating to the rezoning requests that came in, and some different topics. And then to conclude quickly with a briefing on the recently initiated comprehensive plan process. I've seen some questions come up in the comments about why we're doing that, and thought it would be a good opportunity to have Amber at the end quickly remind us and the public of why we're working on that. So with that, if there's not any objections to that discussion format, I can move forward.
Appreciate you
I'm
putting
okay
that.
with it. Yeah. Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
I think go ahead.
Okay, cool. So on the needs assessment in the packet, there's an attachment called needs assessment. It was presented in April of 2019. In the PDF of the packet, it's on page 243. And a couple of things I would just note is that in 2018, the City Council commissioned Brinkley Sargent to perform a spatial needs assessment to determine the needs of the city and Rollingwood and its departments. Currently, all the city departments are operated in a shared use building that was constructed in 1974. And the needs assessment found that the City Hall and Police Department have additional square footage needs from what we have right now. The current municipal building is showing its age. There were also things that were looked at regarding being able to update our PD to potentially move towards accreditation, which is a short-term investment that has a lot of long-term benefits for our city. That we can talk about another time or now. And then if you look at page 248 of the packet, or page 5 of the Brinkley Sargent report, they did this needs assessment, and based on 2019 costs, they assessed that options 1A and options 1B would come in close to $5 million at 2019 prices. They also discussed site issues, that it would be really important if the city did look at rebuilding in the current location, to look at keeping the building footprint to a minimum, because it's over the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone. And it was all of the things that were originally built in have been grandfathered, but if we start making major modifications, then we have to come into compliance with the regulatory regulations now, which are add cost. Also, the GI zoning has an impervious cover limit on it, which our residential doesn't. But GI does at 50%. And then there also are significant storm drainage issues from water runoff. And so the reason that I thought it would be good to just quickly do a briefing on this before we talk about reasons that the council has been open to evaluating additional or alternative properties is that the needs assessment was done so that the council could weigh rebuilding on the current location versus other options. And so at first glance, the report does not indicate that alternative or additional properties are needed, but evaluates those costs. And so I think one of the gaps I've seen as we have a lot of residents who are really trying to understand what the council is working on right now, one of those gaps that I've determined is helping people get from the gap of, okay, I've read the needs assessment, so why are you evaluating additional or alternative properties? So I think that leads into question, or the second point, which is kind of having a discussion about that. And I'll say a few that I say, and I'm interested to hear if there's other reasons that other council members provide. One of the things is just some of the realities of things that came up in the discussion by Brinkley Sargent on the options they've given us, which are on pages, it's on page 42 of the Brinkley Sargent report. They have, and it's page 28 or 286 of the big council PDF. They have these two options where they worked out where we would put the drainage and where we would put public works yard and where we would put the retaining wall that needs to go in and all those kinds of things. And one thing I note is that there's a water quality pond that would need to go in the area that is currently green space in between the parking lot that's down by City Hall and the pavilion. And that's an area that's very historically used by our city during events and for free play. And so that's just it's a note that I have of one of the areas that we would lose as free play in the park. It also contemplates moving the public works yard up by the upper parking lot, which may require us to do some rezoning as well of park to GI. But the biggest thing that I have that I think probably wouldn't be immediately apparent from someone reading the IIP is that when we were doing the needs assessment, is that when we were doing that, we had some downstream neighbors who were really vocal in voicing their concerns about the city doing any additional changes to City Hall and its existing footprint, and how that would impact their drainage downstream. And so the city took the step of also doing an infrastructure improvement plan recently that was finished, and that's also attached in the documents. And in that document gave us citywide drainage solutions at $17 million, plus Bee Caves Road drainage, plus Rollingwood Drive South drainage that weren't even estimated. So I went through and I calculated the portion of the drainage solutions that would be downstream from City Hall. There's 4 of them in what they recommended. There's the Nixon Pleasant, the City Hall property drainage improvements, Pleasant Cove, and then Rockaway Cove that are all considered downstream. They add up to about $7 million in drainage improvements, but 5.2 million of that is effectively to address drainage issues on 2 properties. So one of the things I've just been trying to work through with people on thinking through why the city would consider alternatives is that reality that you can look at $5 million as maybe the building cost, but we also have these drainage issues downstream that could potentially on the low side be another $7 million. So effectively a cost of remodeling City Hall could be closer to $12 million. And we would of course have to take that out for bond. And that's something where the voters are going to have to decide whether to take on $5.2 million of debt just to solve drainage problems on a very small portion of properties. So for me, that's something that I think is an important piece of information for people to have. But I wonder, what other reasons do we have as a council to give for why we have been open to evaluating additional or alternative properties?
I think that all of these discussions have happened, and they haven't all happened at the same time. And that as a city council, we tend to have a lot of different balls in the air at different times. And so one of the things that we do as a city council is try to connect those projects together and see how we can solve multiple problems with different solutions. Maybe one solution will solve multiple problems. And I think it's our job to then evaluate those solutions. So if we're specifically looking at why we would have looked at the Vail property as a solution, I think what you pointed out with our drainage, with our impervious cover, with our spatial needs assessment for what we really need to operate as a staff. One of the issues that I've seen with our spatial needs assessment is that our staff is currently operating in 2,300 square feet, and we, through our spatial needs assessment, have seen what it would take for us to operate without outsourcing the level of services that we outsource as a city. Right now, we have to outsource so many things as a city. Our building inspector, our city engineers, our water billing, our water, AWR does our water repairs for a large part of it. And the reason that we have to outsource a lot of that stuff is because we don't have the space to have that staff in-house. And so it doesn't give us the control over those consultants that we could have if we had salaried employees, because sometimes it doesn't benefit a consultant to do something quickly. Sometimes it can I think cost can get driven up, and it's not just for the city but for the residents. And so I think that just pointing out that whether we renovate City Hall or whether we look for different spaces, that's why we're evaluating these different things, because ultimately the goal is to bring as much as we can in-house so that we have the control over that, and we have the control over our destiny and our budget and how we spend money, and that we have a very competent city administrator. And we have really high level staff now, and we're continuing to hire really excellent people. So that would be a reason why when the opportunity came for 503 Vail to evaluate whether or not this structure would be appropriate to sort of move out some of the spatial needs that we had at City Hall, that the location of that specific building seemed to make sense, that it abutted our neighboring jurisdiction, the city of Austin. It abutted a preserve area that has been known to have some issues. It is also where we stage for special events. It is one of the three main entrances into our city. It is quick access to MOPAC and the Greenbelt. And so to me, when the idea was presented, it made a level of sense. And I think that it on the surface, it is worth exploring. It has been worth exploring. And that's why I would be open and have been open to looking at that as a possibility. It's one of those things where it's a bird in the hand. It's something that we actually have a resident who's willing to work with us to be able to acquire the property under market value. I don't know that it's the right decision for our community. I know that I have talked to people who are in favor of it. I've talked to people who are neutral, and I know that there's a lot of people who have been very vocally against it, and that does weigh in on our decisions. But as a council, we only have the opportunity to talk about public comment that we receive or our feelings about what we think should happen with this building at a public meeting. And so the opportunity to discuss it is what is an important thing to me, because whether or not we purchase that specific property, I think that this is an important discussion for our community, because what it's doing is it's helping people to join in the conversation, to understand the work that's been done, to understand the needs the city has, and then hopefully be able to help us find a solution, even if this isn't the right solution. So I think I've talked to a lot of neighbors, and one of the things that I've said is that possibly that this could be a low risk opportunity for the city to evaluate this property, because we have the opportunity to acquire it under market value. And the reason that I look at the purchase of the property different and separate from the zoning of the property is that I personally would not vote to rezone the property without having a lot of questions answered. And we have not answered a lot of questions. We have not wanted to spend resources on answering a lot of questions because there's no assurance that we could recoup that money if we move forward and don't purchase the property. The reason I say it may be a low risk option to purchase the property and then to use resources to research the feasibility of either short-term or long-term solutions is that because we would purchase it under market value, we could then take time, we could then look at feasibility studies, we could then hire qualified people to evaluate all of the questions that we have, and then make a decision based on real factual information, which we haven't been able to provide. And most of the people I've talked to, and even in evaluating the written responses that we've gotten, the majority of people have said, we want more information, we need more data. And that's what we have to make a decision on whether or not we want to spend money as a city council, and if it's worth spending money. And I don't think it is unless we acquire the property, because if we acquire the property and spend money and we decide not to move forward with this specific property for a public use, then we can sell the property and recoup the money that we've spent evaluating the property for those uses. So that's kind of one of the conversations I've had, and that's a point of view. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but that's a conversation that I've had with the community.
Thanks, Wendy. Other thoughts on reasons that we've been open to evaluating additional or alternative properties?
Well, I would say that my biggest concern with expanding at the existing city council, city hall location has been the drainage issues, because city hall is sitting in the most adversely affected drainage basin in the city, and adding more impervious cover there, in addition to the grandfathered issues that we would have to mitigate by making changes, also adds more runoff into that drainage basin, which is already very problematic, and we have not addressed the existing issues. I don't want to make them worse. So that's been my main concern. And one thing that I want to point out with the needs assessment, I think that, there may be some of the outside services that wouldn't really make sense to bring in-house. Like, I don't really know that we have enough work to bring a city engineer in-house. But since that city hall was built, we purchased the upper park. We installed a sewer system, so we have more public works staff. We've added police officers, so we have more police officers on staff than we had before. the surrounding city, like the city of Austin, has grown. So we have more issues that we are dealing with because of growth around us as well. So I think those are all things that add to the need for us to have more space. Even if Rollingwood itself is not getting any bigger, things are changing inside the city and around us as well that necessitate more space. So.
Thanks, Sarah. Becca or Gavin, any thoughts?
Buck, do you have anything? I'll just say, I mean, I very much appreciate, I think this is needed context in the discussion. I think it's helpful for everyone to have a broader sense of the complexities of the problems that we're trying to solve here, and the reasons in which we might want to look at as many different options as possible. To echo what Wendy said, whether this is the right solution or not, I think this is a good exercise to go through to have a level of education for the community of what we're trying to deal with. And so I appreciate you laying out the work session the way you have, and bringing those other issues to the forefront.
Hey guys, so I think there's
something
has been wrong with my phone because I was talking before Gavin and then I realized nobody else was hearing. But because then Gavin started talking and I don't think Gavin would have started talking if I was talking. But yes, I mean, I agree with all the points that have been made. I think it really helps people, and hopefully enough people are tuning in to understand where we've been, where we're trying to go, and what, the issues that we're trying to resolve. I will say I've talked to a bunch of residents in the last week, and I have made a suggestion to some residents about forming a subcommittee through planning and zoning to help find a facility for the police station, whether it's this one or a different facility or whatever site it is. I will say, however, I'm extremely disappointed that nobody has taken me up on that. Nor has anybody called the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, at least as of yesterday, to put that on the next agenda. So as I really appreciate everybody's feedback that's been given to us over the last month or so, I think it's also really important to be part of the solution too, and not just feedback on one site. So if we're not going to do it here or there or wherever it might be, we still have an issue that needs to be resolved, and we would obviously prefer the community's input.
Thanks, Buck. One additional note I would make regarding the difference between short-term versus long-term under this is if we do end up rebuilding and remodeling at the existing hall site, we still have to then house our PD and our public works and our administration and have a place for public meetings during that time. And so the other reason why the city council has remained open to evaluating additional or alternative properties is we need to understand what the costs will be and the potential availability of properties within our city for those purposes. I've had a lot of comments late, especially after the meeting, of indications of rates that are happening in the city. And I know that Amber did some work with a commercial real estate consultant already to look at what's available in our city. And I do think, to your point, Buck, that I think it's something where The comments regarding us putting out an RFP and having people bid on it, very, very well formed, very appreciated. A subcommittee would be very appreciated to do that work. And then I think that the other thing that we're going to have to do is educate that group or put in the RFP the information that we know potentially increases the cost to the city of some of those places. There's things about the reality of finding office space for a PD that it has to be on the ground floor. There can't be impediments to our officers getting in and out of the parking lot that would decrease emergency response times unnecessarily. There's security requirements that the building's going to have to agree to, which I'm guessing tie to commercial insurance considerations. I don't know that area. I do know a lot about insurance, but not that area. And also there are buildings that don't allow anyone to carry a gun in them. And that's something that our officers have. So that's just it's a very brief list of things I know that make building selection a little more challenging for our PD, more than just a general administrative building lease. And Amber, I wonder if there's anything else that you feel like would be helpful to just share about things that we've discovered in that process.
Right. And I think, some of the properties that we checked on were pretty cost prohibitive, or maybe not cost prohibitive to some people, but on our small budget, they certainly would be, and hard to absorb with our, 11-cent O&M that, we're already, not making much more money, but to afford a possibly $250,000 payment on rental space is probably not something that would easily fit in our operational budget. I think you covered everything else with regard to PD. There are special challenges for having a public space. We need to make sure we have accessibility. And so it has been challenging, and I know we've looked at a few places, but just continue to research and see what might work best for everybody.
Thanks, Amber. Any other thoughts on number 2? If not, I'll move to number 3. So I had one other thought on number 3 that I didn't include in 2.
I would just reiterate that I hadn't thought of the short-term solution for the police station when we started this process, or for the public works or for city. But it was suggested to me by a member of the community that this property could potentially be a stopgap for the city, where we can purchase it under market value at $1.2 million. The city doesn't pay taxes. We could hold the property, do a limited remodel. Of course, this takes feasibility studies and money to do. So it's not something that we would do unless we actually acquired the property. And we don't know if it's feasible without a feasibility study. But the idea is that it could be then looked at for a short-term solution and remodeled as a stopgap, so that we would have a place to house city staff and then not end up paying that money in rent that we would in other locations. And we'd have to remodel anywhere we went, most places that we would go for the city. So there would be a cost incurred for that anyhow. So I think that reasoning is just something to consider. It was something that was brought to me that I hadn't thought of. And I think I appreciate when we're thinking outside the box and finding different solutions, because to me, that's what this community conversation is about, is us actually having a conversation, and what comes out of that is always better than people just trying to do something alone. And so I appreciate our council being willing to talk about this. And also I really appreciate the thoughtful comments from our community. Like, we have had some really thoughtful discussion and comments, and really civil, thoughtful people weighing in on it. So I think it's helpful.
Thanks, Wendy. So I would move on to number 3, and if somebody has a thought just on number 2, also you can jump back in. But there are some specific reasons that I have had for being open to evaluating 503 Vale Street, specifically for the PD for shorter long-term use. And I think that in previous meetings, I didn't take the opportunity to speak all those. I said some of them at the last meeting, but I did mention at the last meeting that one of the things that I'm watching, that I've watched for the last 5 years and participated actively in discussions about, is what's happening at Zilker Park and how that impacts our city. Typically it's traffic concerns, but right now there is a master planning process that has been initiated by the city of Austin. And so in the packet for the meeting, I included the working group report that was issued in 2019. And it has a lot of recommendations that were made by that working group that were then incorporated into the RFP that the city of Austin put out to work on their Zilker master plan. And I don't know that this is the arena to get into the nitty gritty, but I thought it was worth bringing that information back here so that those who are interested in following what's going on with that issue could read further. A couple of things I noted just are that there are recommendations for different kinds of public-private partnerships, which would potentially impact traffic and uses throughout the park. It does not seem to exclude the preserve from further evaluation of additional uses. And so those are just things where, because of the work that I've done in the city over the last 5 years related to transportation, it seemed reasonable for me to look at this particular property. If I am not even sure I could think of another residential property in the city that I would look at related to this topic, and the issue that if the uses change significantly in the preserve as we know it, there may be a desire for from the community for us to be able to have a bit more of a city presence in that area, or to be able to manage whatever may come up. And I don't know what those things are going to be. It's not a fear thing. I'm not trying to make people afraid, because I just literally don't know. In the past, I tried to ask the city of Austin if we could put a pile of dirt in that empty grass field that's part of the preserve for like a day while we were doing a street project. And they told me that the preserve can't ever be touched and nothing can ever happen. But I'm hearing other conversations now that seem to imply that the city of Austin may be looking at alternative uses for it. So I just throw that out there as things that I'm observing, and that influenced at least me thinking it was reasonable to evaluate this property. So I wonder if there's any other thoughts on this particular property, pros for an evaluation, before we move on to the feedback from residents.
I would say that I noted some things that I thought were considering this property for, and I think that the positioning on Rollingwood Drive at the edge of the residential boundary, where it's already a higher volume entry and exit point for the city, that location seemed to make sense for me. It has one directly abutting neighbor. It backs to the preserve. It's easy for Rollingwood officers to get in and out of Rollingwood onto Mopac and Bee Cave Road. It has ground floor access. So, and then just the fact that it's being offered at an under market value price gives us an opportunity to be able to consider the building, use it as a stopgap, potentially consider using it for a longer term use. I think right now there seems to be a lot of community input against that, but that might be an understatement. But I think it's worth evaluating with more information, because I don't think that we don't have enough information to have made a zoning request that we made. We'll get to that later in the discussion. I see that there's a different point that we'll talk about that. But I think that it's hard to make a decision if you don't have all of the information. And I couldn't make a zoning decision without a lot more information. And if we couldn't recoup our money studying the options, then I would be less inclined to move forward with a property. But this property gives us a unique opportunity to evaluate it, but not lose money if we do that.
Thanks, Wendy. Any other thoughts on number 3 before we move to 4? All right, hearing none. So under the discussion of resident feedback, I took the time to go through all the comments that I have and emails that were submitted to the city, and also some that I got that I don't know that they are in the city record yet. And then also conversations that I've had. And I've tried to accumulate the comments under 3 different categories. And so what I saw were that there were public comments related to our process, and I'd like to kind of address that. There were also comments related to a change in zoning from residential to GI, and then also comments related to the content of what was in our zoning request. So I would like to start with the rezoning process steps, and I think it could be helpful. I'm going to refer a little bit to our city ordinance. I put it in the packet so you can look at it there. It's on page 32 of the PDF packet, or if you look at the attachments, it's the Rollingwood Zoning Code Admin and Enforcement section. Or if you want to pull it up in the city code, it starts with section 107-516. So I tried to go back and listen from the beginning of this conversation to council meetings, and also look at the minutes and the comments. And I saw a lot of comments that were related to the process that the city undertook. So one note I had, if under section 107-516 of our code, we are allowed as a council, or the Planning and Zoning Commission can on its own motion initiate changes in zoning regulations. So that is what I did. I made the motion at our April 30th meeting that initiated that zoning request. And what I would say is that in hindsight, perhaps it would be something where having a policy in place or a direction, if the city is initiating a zoning request, that we also indicate what level of budget we want to provide for staff and what type of consultants we might want hired and what type of content we want delivered as part of that rezoning process. So I think one of the things that I saw was I just initiated this process, and our staff, who are great stewards of our city resources, followed what's in our code. And a lot of the comments that have come back about process, about the type of notice, and about how this was initiated, I think they don't go to our city staff not having done its job. It goes to the council potentially, and I'm the one who made the motion, not having given additional steps that we might want taken. And I think there was also, there was commentary too then about keeping costs as low as possible. So a thought could be that as we revisit any type of zoning issues in the process, potentially just thinking about the fact that if we were a private entity making a zoning request or zoning change request, we would probably have a consultant who has done multiple zoning requests before, and we would have a budget to put together a lot of assessments that we just didn't give our staff the budget to do. And so, just a question is how much more do we want, more than just the fact that we can initiate that, and then the staff are going to spend as little as possible unless we tell them to do more. So that was one thing I noticed. And then there also in our code, we have under section 107-517, we have the application process, and then 107-518, we have the hearing and the notice. And our hearing and notice process is actually a little bit more than, I think, than what's required by state law. But that's something where if I feel like we're hearing some comments that perhaps we need to look at some ways we can modernize that process, to use some additional channels more than the mail. I also have heard from a lot of people that they did get the mail, and that it was more, a lot of it was residents who've lived here a lot longer who indicated they watched their mail, and that they feel like that's proper notice from the city. But I think it's a question, given that we've updated a lot of our technology and we do have more ways that we communicate with residents about things like trash pickup, to look at whether we want to allow people to opt in the future to also receive notices about rezoning and city meetings, through those same things like the Swift 911. So that was something that I noticed. And I think that those process steps, I think, are things where maybe it's something that planning and zoning would look at, or maybe it's something that we as a council look at. But I think this has been a good exercise to see, of the people who live in Rollingwood right now. I have seen comments that for the type of request that was put out, that there's a feeling that there should be more types of notice, and whether that's the way, maybe it's you have to initiate it and have a public hearing when you initiate a request, or it goes to planning and zoning first. I don't know, but I do think that it's worth figuring out some ways that we can make sure that our rezoning process in the city aligns with what the residents who live here now are wanting it to look like. So I wonder if there were any other thoughts on kind of the process, the notice, comments that we received on notice, comments that we received on the way that the motion, or the way that the rezoning was initiated.
I have a comment just in relation to this meeting. I did see on Nextdoor that there was a comment made, hey, there's a workshop meeting tonight, and I'm posting it here because the city's not using other communication methods to let you know. I had already been in communication with our administrative staff and said, please use every vehicle available, electronic communication vehicle available, to make sure that we get the word out. And I went and checked, and we had put it on our Facebook news section. We had put it out on Nextdoor. We had put it out on our Facebook page, and we had put the public agenda out there. And in addition, Swift 911 was used to send a text message and a phone call and an email to every resident. so I then kind of followed up just to find out with that citizen what maybe was missing from them, not receiving the communication, and like how could we do a better job than those vehicles that we used. And so I was told that maybe Twitter would have helped to get the word out. So I think that's a free resource that we also use to let neighbors know what's going on. I do know that there have been concerns that if we use our emergency alert system too much to send out messages, then eventually it loses its voice in the community. The people will start ignoring it. And so one of the options that we have, this is a new platform that the city has set up. And so one of the options that we have is to create subscription groups. And so I've already been working with Ashley on that to see how people can go in and register for the system and then customize their experience. And so that way they could subscribe to the sort of messaging that they want to receive from the city through our system. It may be public events. It may be they want to know about all zoning issues. They may want to be alerted anytime the city council posts an agenda. And those are things that we can create subscription groups to. And then they would actually be able to receive text messages or phone calls based on their preferences. So as a city, I think that we have some vehicles that we can use to help customize people's experience. And I think we have a staff that's more than willing and able to do that. So I appreciate the idea and the thoughts that we've received from the community that we need to modernize our communication methods, because a letter in the mail can't get lost for people. And we have other things that we could use.
Thanks, Wendy. Another thought I had on this too, I forgot to say it earlier, is just that one of the things that, as our city has commented on transportation projects around the region, that we've been able to see the needle get moved on a little bit by other agencies, is those agencies putting in more formal public participation policies that have tiers to them. And so then depending on the type of action that government agency is taking, there's different tiers of public involvement that are automatically triggered. And the thing about that is I think it would require some work by a subgroup somewhere, because every time you add communication, other than if we're using the free tools like Wendy mentioned, we're also increasing the cost of that notice. And so in this case, I wonder, if we added more notice requirements, it would potentially be an increased use of taxpayer resources at the same time. And so I think there's that balance, that if there's a group that might want to take up this issue, or a council member that wants to take it up, there's that balance that we could hopefully find with the cost to the city or to another zoning applicant too, if we required all zoning applicants to do it, versus the actual connection that notice getting to a resident and then feeling like they have the notice that they need to have participated.
I have a comment or two.
Great.
And I think everyone knows where I am at this point. I mean, I plan to vote against the rezoning, and I plan to vote against the purchase. But this question in my mind is different. There seems to be some thought out there that there was a great deal of public discussion that transpired on this property prior to when we instigated the zoning process. But my whole thought process on when we started the ball rolling on the zoning process was for that to trigger the public notice requirements. And I mean, based on the sheer volume of public input that we've had pretty much since day one of that process beginning, I don't, it's hard for me to agree with the argument that the public notice process didn't work. And I'm fully supportive of posting this on our Facebook page and sending emails and doing Swift 911 or 411. All of those options are great. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with what the state statute requires in terms of the public notice. And that is the be all end all of the notice requirement. And I've been where citizens are today in opposing actions that city council is looking at. That's how I got involved in city government. And I put a calendar reminder on my phone to remind me every month to pull the city council agenda and pull the P&Z agenda and see what was happening and see if I disagreed with it. And for 18 months, I did that. And for 18 months, I went to every P&Z hearing every month on the same night. So I'm all for trying to increase that public notice availability. But there's a certain amount of due diligence that I think is kind of inherent in what the state statute requires. We meet on city council at the same night every month. P&Z meets the same night every month. And so there's a certain amount of educational component that I think goes with anyone who wants to be engaged, and I hope everyone is engaged in that process. But by and large, Rollingwood goes above and beyond what is required in terms of public notice. So.
Thanks, Gavin. And I would agree with that too, that I do think that through a lot of the communication channels that we use, that we are going above and beyond that one mailer in many areas. So hopefully, I don't know. When Barry Boone was mayor, he used to say that at some point in time, local government ends up affecting each person, and that's when they usually get involved. And so if there's anything I'm seeing some new names and faces involved with this issue, and I do hope that people will continue to remain involved. So if there's any other comments on the zoning process, I would move to public comments related to the change in zoning from residential to governmental institutional. And I went through and let's see, let me get down to my section here. Where are we? I went through and noted a lot of the comments that came in that were directly related to the idea of the rezoning itself of a residential property to government institutional. And it was helpful for me to do the exercise of kind of pulling those comments out and looking at them in that regard, because it helped me to kind of see that there's some patterns of agreement for sure. And then there's also some things that I hadn't considered as I did that. So I'll just read slowly the list of things that I found, and hopefully people will hear things that they said. If I paraphrased and missed it, I'm sure people will let me know that I did. But this is what I found. A desire to renovate the existing city hall for the needs identified in the needs assessment route support, and a strong desire to support the PD's needs for an updated space within the land that's already zoned government institutional. A concern regarding the potential for change in the residential nature of the street and quality of life on Vale Street. Some of those things that under that category were additional noise, activity and disruption, increased parking and traffic issues, a restructured property. There was concern about negative impact on property values surrounding the property on 503 Vale Street, a concern about the loss in property tax revenue to the city from a residential property moving to a GI status, concern about the cost to taxpayers for the proposed use of the property as a PD, concern about the feasibility of an on-site parking lot on a GI property, given the impervious cover limitations, concern about the feasibility and safety of this particular lot, of an access point to the property being on Arnulfo Alonso. So that one's a little more unique to this property. Advocating that the highest and best use of residential property is as residential property right now. Concern about the location being used for other governmental services beyond PD, and that being in the residential setting, not expected to be in the residential setting as people bought their homes there now. A lot of concern about the precedent set by rezoning a residential lot to government institutional. Also heard a preference from neighbors who live near City Hall for the PD to remain near their homes, and views that neighbors who purchased near City Hall knew they were purchasing near that area and want it to be used fully as that type of area. A desire for government, institutional, and PD in particular to continue to be part of our Rollingwood Park area, and just the availability for the officers to be there for safety response in the park. And also the potential of other properties in the business district to be used rather than a residential property, and a desire to see parkland near the existing City Hall rezoned before rezoning a residential property to government institutional. So those were the things that I saw that were comments against this type of rezoning. And I also have received comments of people who are in favor of the city purchasing and then evaluating rezoning, that are mainly concerned with just the reality that the location of the PD right there, because it's already a property that's close to it's at the edge of the city, it's already a high traffic area, that it would be reasonable to consider it for a PD. So I wonder if there's any other comments that anyone wants to highlight or talk about that we've received related to just a change in zoning of a lot from residential to GI.
I don't want to jump in if somebody else wants to talk, but nobody else is going to talk, I will. I also, I appreciate you laying out all of that, Amy, and I also went through as an exercise and read through each public comment, and I'm a type A person, so I made a database and I tried to, put an X everywhere in the column of where people's comments hit. And so I saw the same sort of concerns. There were people, there were a handful of people that wrote in support of it. But I think by and far the major trend that I saw in the comments from the most amount of people was just that there wasn't enough information to evaluate this option. And I did see that there were a lot of people who signed on to a petition. I think that number was emailed to us right before the city council meeting. I think it was 88 people now from 54 households. I don't want to say this wrong. Somebody please correct me. I don't have my email pulled up. So I think that what I've noticed is that neighbors in Rollingwood are good neighbors, and if a neighbor is concerned or upset about a zoning issue, then a neighbor is going to stand by their neighbor, and I appreciate that about our community. I do think, though, as a city council, that it's right for us to handle this issue evenly, to evaluate it evenly, to see the pros and cons through the lens of the city and evaluate it, because that's the right thing for us to do as an exercise. So this, again, may not be the right property for our city, but there are different viewpoints that people express in the city. That there have been written comments, but there have also been phone calls, people who've stopped and talked to us on the streets, text messages. And so I know we've all gotten a variety of different comments from citizens, and I'm trying to just make sure that that we are respectful of everybody's point of view and not just the loudest point of view, which is an important point of view too. So, but I also think it's important, and the city council is required to look at what is best for the community and evaluate those things so that we can make the best possible decision that we can with our taxpayer resources for everybody. So I appreciate all of the thoughtful comments that have come in, and thank you for reading those out. It's very helpful.
Thanks, Wendy. Any other thoughts on the public comments that have come in related to the change in zoning from residential to government institutional? All right, well, hearing none, the last section I have on 4 is just looking at public comments related to the content of the zoning request. And I really wanted to make sure that I addressed a couple of them, because I think that they are issues that came up with another zoning request and potentially are some things that we could also look at addressing. I'm trying to find my notes where I had that section. I have lost my place. Oh, there we go. Okay. So one of the comments that I saw, which is an interesting comment, our zoning code that we were looking at earlier that gives the process that we take is that the council initiates a motion on its own, and our code also indicates that the applicant is either the owner or an owner's agent. And so in our zoning application that we submitted, we listed the owner as the city of Rollingwood. And so we've received some comments that I would put under the heading of standing. And it's just I wanted to note the issue, and I don't, it's not something, of course, we're going to resolve tonight, but it may be just worth us noting as something to address. But we had some comments saying that the city couldn't be the owner because we haven't actually purchased the property yet. And then we also had some comments saying that rezoning the property is a prerequisite to the city purchasing the property. And so I do think that this is an interesting area when it comes to zoning requests that also came up when there was the reasonable accommodation request that we had for that same property. And one of the threshold questions was whether there was standing to put that in. And we were advised that on the record, our legal counsel gave us advice that the purchase agreement that we initiated was sufficient entry into a contract for us to have that standing, but perhaps it's an area that in the future could use some more clarification of what is purchase the prerequisite for the city to then initiate a zoning process, and if it's not, then what actions does the city need to take? And that's the second area that I saw a lot of comment that was related to the content of the zoning request, zoning change request, is just related to this idea of kind of what is the minimum content threshold that we need to have as a city, and really any applicant, but I think especially the city, since we're both the applicant and we're evaluating our own application later, that puts us in a different position than when it's a separate applicant. What is that minimum content threshold? And so some of the things I noticed in the written comments addressed that our zoning application doesn't address the parking requirements of our zoning code, which for the GI zoning requirement, our zoning application misstates the current status of the existing municipal building, was a comment. Our zoning application does not state how buffering requirements of the zoning code will be met. It lacks an accompanying design and development for accessing feasibility and cost. And so I appreciate all of those comments of the types of things. What I looked at them as were, these are the types of things that I suppose that we need to evaluate whether as a city, those are what threshold questions we need to have spent time on and put in a zoning application for it to be considered proper. And not to say that what we submitted isn't, but I do think if there was a moment there when we just had personal health issues in our family where I didn't watch this application quite as closely, and I might have gone back and suggested some amendments to our actual application to correct some wording choices and some of the things that were put in it, just to reduce some of the issues that I'm seeing in the comments related to there being confusion caused by the content of the zoning request itself. And I think that actually brought up an issue for me of wondering, kind of in our process right now, we don't have something that addresses how amendments are dealt with and kind of what ends up restarting the clock. And so that may be something helpful to look at in the future of for example, if the city were to try to amend, and I'm not saying that this is advisable in any way, but if the city were to try to amend our zoning application now to correct some of the content that's in that zoning application, does that restart the whole process? And I think that's something where we haven't really had an applicant who has gotten a no vote at planning and zoning and then tried to go amend or tried to withdraw and restart, but it may just be something procedurally worth looking at. And I would say that in good faith, we literally are the city. There's not some other like boogeyman out there that's the city. It's the residents that run the council. So I would suggest that if we were to do any type of amendments or rezoning, we would start the process over again, because we would have a clearer idea of, well, I think my preference would be that we would have purchased the property and then we would have the opportunity to provide this kind of data. I will also say I don't know at this point that that's advisable, but I think one of the things I've seen here is that there's that question. The question was raised about standing, and we initiated this process kind of under the idea of tying the rezoning with the purchase, and it did make it difficult without having set a budget initially for staff to get the type of data that people have been asking for. for us to be able to meet that requirement that our residents are wanting of the level of information that would be in the application. So that's not to say, it's not to say that I think that there's things about this that are definitely lessons learned for me about, I've never been someone who participated in initiating a zoning change, and there's some lessons learned here for me about the types of questions that I would ask in the future about the types of information that the city is going to hope to provide as part of that rezoning process, and the costs of providing it and the types of consultants that might be needed to do that. And then the other, under that same kind of heading on some of the things that we haven't been able to answer that I've seen in comments, is whether the existing structure is actually suitable for remodel as a PD. We have some base level discussions of that, but again, like Wendy pointed out, we haven't spent the money to fully investigate that question, because if we spent it before the purchase, it's money that we would not have an opportunity to get back if we didn't use it as a PD. And there's some other questions I think that just go with this rezoning request, like that we would also need to spend money on, and that we might not know fully the answers to until after we were able to actually get in the property. Some of them we could probably get before, some after, but I saw comments asking for evaluation of the additional costs that the city is going to have for redundancies, having two separate buildings and then maintaining those two separate buildings, and the costs that the number of different costs that could become redundant. And then I also saw a few thoughtful comments about just the reality of assessing culture changes and challenges that might exist in administrative oversight if you have if you don't have all of our services together in one place. So I really appreciated all of the content related comments, and struggled sometimes to answer to them, because I would like to have more information, and a lot of the information that I would like to have costs money, and we didn't necessarily budget for that up front. So I wonder if there's any other thoughts. Yeah, go ahead.
I would add to that that some of the concerns that I've had from residents, and that's actually been on my radar for a long time, is just that intersection at Vale and Rollingwood Drive and the safety issues. It's a really wide-mouthed intersection, and people tend to accelerate around it. And so one of the things that I've heard are just like that people are concerned about the safety issues with the ingress and egress of that property. But then I've also heard some thoughtful comments about how if we're able to initiate a use of this property for a public use, that they would be hopeful that we could address the safety issues there and fix the road where there would be more pedestrian safety around that property, and that we may have the resources to do it if we had the property and we're making an investment in it. So I know that has been on my transportation list for a long time, and we've considered different options that might work to slow down traffic there, traffic circles, or changing the configuration of the pork chop that's in the road. But that is another issue that I don't think that we could spend the money on evaluating if we couldn't recoup that money right now. But it would be something that we could evaluate if we had that, if we did purchase the property.
Thanks, Wendy. That's an interesting idea, especially a lot of the comments that I've had from residents on Vale about the speeding and the things that contribute to that, about that wide mouth there and some other areas. Any other thoughts on the public comments that we've received related to the content of the zoning request? All right, well, hearing none, the last thing on here is a briefing on the recently initiated comprehensive plan process by Pegasus. And I asked Amber to prep something, and I'll just kind of give a little bit of intro to why I thought it was important to have this in our work session again. A lot of this discussion that has come up where people are thoughtfully considering how zoning influences the character of our city is exactly what our comprehensive plan process is going to evaluate on a larger scale. And so I really appreciate that Planning and Zoning initiated this process and asked the council to budget for it, and that it's now going to start. And I think that from a timeliness perspective, it would be good for Amber to kind of give us a little bit more briefing on the timeline and what to expect, so that people know what they'll be participating in. They'll kind of know some of the things to look forward to that are going to come from it. And then also, I think it would be great to have Gavin too, since you were your RP&Z liaison, just provide some comment on that process and what you see as some of the important things about it. So I'll give it to Amber.
Thanks, Amy. I think you gave a really great actually definition about what a comprehensive plan is. It provides a connection between community goals and property regulation. And I think it really came about after the RCDC commissioned the corridor study. And in connection with that, at the same time, Planning and Zoning was being approached by a handful of property owners who were wishing to redevelop their property. And I think the Planning and Zoning Commission rightly decided we've never had a comprehensive plan. That's something that's strange for a Texas municipality. We really need to know what the community visions and goals are in order to help us guide the property regulations that we're going to implement. And so Pegasus has gotten to work. They've been working really hard all month. They've created a digital base map of the current zoning map and land use. They've been analyzing our demographic and economic data. They have created an online community survey for staff and some council members' eyes, which we'll be reviewing soon. They've been setting up and holding interviews and focus groups with some key stakeholders in the community. And then they've been meeting with staff bi-weekly, and they've taken a tour of the city. And so the month of July will be focused on two main items, community engagement and communication, and finalizing chapter 1 of the comprehensive plan. And hopefully the online survey will be up on the, Ashley is creating a web page for the city comprehensive plan, so that all the materials will be there, easily located by community members who want to participate. We're of course doing our best to get public participation in the pandemic, but if you have any issues with participating, please reach out to me, and we'll make sure that you are able to participate. We are going to release a press release this week about the project in the PICU. So that's where we're at with that. Any questions?
And I would just echo those comments, and yours also, Amy. Had a good visit with Pegasus, and just encouraged them, at least from my perspective, I think the importance of trying to pull together all the various master plans and infrastructure planning that we've done over the past 3 years and really try to get those in one comprehensive document. I think that's really the one of the key components to having a comprehensive plan and to get us in compliance with the local government code in relation to having a comprehensive plan. And so I look forward to them doing that and pulling all of that together for us so that we do have a guide map for the future, which is, I think, an improvement from how we've operated in the past.
Thanks, Gavin. And thanks, Amber, for sharing that. Yeah, I think that it occurred to me as I was looking through so many people engaging thoughtfully and thinking about the zoning of our city, that I just wanted to make sure we took the time to address and state that we are hearing all of these comments, and then also acknowledge that they are really important in helping us figure out how to make decisions. They help me in figuring out how to make decisions. But I also really want to encourage people to participate in this comprehensive planning process, hopefully with an attitude of this being like Gavin said, something that will bring us into compliance with state regulations, and provide potentially more advance notice for neighbors about what to expect in the future. I really appreciate some of the comments that I've seen, that there was an expectation of the type of zoning that people were buying into, and that matters. And I also think that we as a city have some opportunities in the commercial corridor to work on solutions that may work. One example I would point to is that the Planning and Zoning Commission did some really, really, really thoughtful work on adjusting the zoning for C2, I believe it was, to allow for veterinary services upon the request of Paz to go into that old office building where Torguten was, there on Edgegrove. And what I saw there was a request for something that was not allowed in that zoning area, but Planning and Zoning really, really thoughtfully worked through what would allow this to be something that we would want in this area. And in particular, they really focused on not allowing daytime kenneling services. I remember Jordan Scott, the chair, kind of mentioning he's seen that in other places, and that leads to traffic buildup in the morning as people are waiting to drop their dogs off for dog daycare. And there were quite a few other thoughtful things that Planning and Zoning worked through related to doing a change in zoning. And so I feel like that is a great example for our community to look at, of the type of work that this Planning and Zoning Commission and that the council are willing to put into thoughtful changes in zoning. And there was also a zoning request that came in from a bank to adjust our zoning for C1. And it was denied after a lot of thoughtful conversation. And so zoning requests tend to require the community to participate. And I really appreciate the community participating here, because we get community-centered solutions when the community is able to participate. And I also appreciate everyone just bearing with us and being patient as we continue to learn how to do meetings via video conference, and some of the things that are unique about that and how it impacts how I'm used to being able to interact in a council meeting with people, and also being able to see everyone else's reactions as well. And that type of nonverbal communication also just being missing from the meeting right now. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone, all the council members, being willing to take another evening to have this discussion.
And
Is Mike still on the line? Okay.
I do want to say
Yeah, I'm
that
sorry.
that the Planning and Zoning Commission did take up this issue, and that's something that we hadn't talked about in this meeting. That they did take up the issue on zoning. I think that they had a very thoughtful conversation during their meeting, and they did discuss some of the other ideas that the council has discussed. But their comment was that that's not what they were asked to decide, and they didn't have the information that they would need to talk to really have any suggestion on those other things. And so I think even planning and zoning did make mention that they thought there were other ideas for this property, but if they were being asked to call a vote on the zoning of the property based on what information that they had, that they unanimously voted no. And I think I would be in the same shoes if I was voting on zoning. Postponing it was because I wasn't ready to vote for it one way or another because there's just not enough information. So it wasn't like some sort of trick or trickery where we're trying to pull a fast one or do something that is underhanded. It's just more that we needed to have more conversation about this, and we will, have an opportunity to have some more public comment at the end of this meeting. And then at our next month's meeting, this will be on the agenda, and there will be more opportunity for public comment and also for us to discuss this and to find out what we as a body want to do. So, I think that it's important to just recognize that there's a lot of people who care about the city. We're all volunteers. The P&Z are volunteers, and that if you throw around that there's distrust against the city council, or that there's whatever insinuations have been made on the public next door site, it's not true. We all serve the city because we care about it and we care about our neighbors. And I appreciate for the most part that this has been a really respectful conversation and that people have commented on the actual proposal and haven't moved into attack mode on the people who are coming out with new ideas. So I hope that can continue and that we can continue to have a really good, respectful community conversation. And I appreciate that.
Okay.
That's
Well,
the end of my thoughts. So
yep.
if unless anybody else has any other thoughts, can hand it back for you to manage the next part of the meeting.
I appreciate it.
Or
Council, you guys have any other comments or thoughts or questions? Anything you want to get in before I open up to the public? Okay, well then, not hearing any, then I am going to open it up for public comments at 7:36. Guys, so just for a reminder, if you're joining from your laptop, there is a hand symbol down at the bottom of your screen. Click on that, and it will notify Amber that you're interested in speaking, and she'll give you a call. If you're dialing in with a number, please listen for the last 4 digits, and I'll let Ashley here in a second go through how you raise your hand via phone. And if you are joining from a tablet, there is a 3 little dots down in your bottom right corner. If you click on that, you'll also see the hand icon. It's the same process as I described before. Please click that and wait to be called. Just out of respect for time, we'd ask that people hold their comments to 3 minutes. And with that, I will open it up for public comment. Amber?
Mayor,
Barr?
Council, I have to sign off. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thanks for joining us, Buck.
Yep.
Okay, we've got Grant Spark. Grant, I'm going to mute you. You have to mute yourself and your hand is lowered.
Okay, thank you. I didn't even realize I'd raised my hand, but I wanted to clarify something that Councilwoman Hundley said. She intimated that I'm paraphrasing, the neighbors had just signed on to be good neighbors on this petition, and that couldn't be anything further from the truth. I know about 14 of those people that signed that petition. I've never met the other some 100 and however many, 111. Personally, never met them in my life. They reached out to me, asked to be on that opposed list. So there was no good, that wasn't a gesture of being a good neighbor. These folks are opposed to this project of rezoning and are trying to voice their opposition. And I know the vast majority of people that have contacted the city council directly that aren't on that list are also opposed. And then my only other comment, and I've been pretty vocal through this process, is that correcting the process on the back end still isn't going to make this right based on the overwhelming opposition of the residents, in my view. The majority of the people, I think, are opposed. They're way more well-informed than they've been on a variety of city issues. And just because you can do something and correct it process-wise doesn't make it right in my view. And I just want to share that final opinion with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Amber, who do we have next?
Jack Hollins, you are unmuted. You need to unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll start. Thank you. Hi, my name's Jack Holland. I'm a real estate investor and developer, and we live on Park Hills. To begin, I want to say I think Rollingwood Police do an excellent job, and they need to be housed in bigger and better facilities. But with regards to the 503 Vale proposal, I am very much against it. My reasons are: one, all our residents have bought their homes on the understanding that they're located in a residential neighborhood. By changing a single-family home into a police station, it'll betray the trust that homeowners have placed in the city to protect our zoning. It'll create a dangerous precedent. I'm very pleased our Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously against this proposal, and the council should not dismiss that. Point two, I did my own research and found on Vale and Rollingwood Drive there are 14 homes situated within 400 feet of 503 Vale. I consider 400 feet to be directly impacted. Of those 14 households, 11 are in opposition to this plan. That means nearly 80% of directly affected residents are against it. My home location is not affected by this at all. But when I talk to my neighbours, they express the same levels of opposition. My point being, if most of the people in Rollingwood don't want to live close by a police station, why do you think it's okay to force that on somebody else? It's my understanding that neither the mayor or any of the council members live within 400 feet of it. Point three, our current police station is about 650 square feet. 503 Vale is 4,700 square feet. That's 7.5 times the current size. While our city population isn't getting any larger, we're very close to being fully built out. We don't need a huge police station. Point four, a purchase price of 1.2 million plus several $100,000 in renovation costs. This project is exorbitantly expensive, will create a huge amount of debt. I personally viewed this property for several hours as a prospective investment. I took my builder. The internal layout there has a lot of problems, and we both agreed there was a considerable amount of work to be done. This could end up costing the city close to $2 million. It has been 0.5. It's been suggested to buy it anyway. But if we don't make it a police station, then we can always sell it again. Well, I really don't think the city council should issue public debt to get into the real estate speculation business. Point 6, final. In my opinion, the solution is clear. We should use land we currently own. I think we should lock down the existing police facilities, push out the footprint to just 1,000 square feet to minimize drainage impact, and build a brand new 2-story police station totaling 2,000 square feet on the existing site. I consulted with the builder. Our initial estimates that the whole thing could be built for less than 500,000. That's a saving of up to 1.5 million. The council could then use those savings towards other much-needed projects like City Hall renovation or drainage repair. And I urge the council to reserve that option. To sum up, I think we need a practical, cost-effective solution that works for all residents and not a hugely expensive showcase project that will only create division and that many of us oppose. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate your time. If we could just make sure, guys, that those were great comments. If we could try to keep it tight to 3 minutes, we'd all appreciate it. Thanks again, Jack, for your time. Amber, who is up next?
Marty Fitzgerald. Marty, you're unmuted. You can unmute yourself. Marty, it looks
Hey,
like
Marty,
you're
we
on
can't-
your computer. There's a little wheel in the lower right-hand corner. Go to your audio settings. To unmute, there's a microphone at the bottom of your computer.
Can't hear.
She's still muted.
I know she was having a little bit of issue getting this to work for her, so maybe she's just, sometimes there's a lag with unmute stuff.
Mayor, in the meantime, we have Mike Wiley who has his hand raised.
Okay.
Marty,
Okay,
I'll leave
let's-
you on mute to continue to work on it.
Yeah, Marty, we'll get you back up next. Mike, glad to have you. So you have the floor.
Mike, you have to unmute yourself.
Hey, everybody. I was delinquent in letting everybody know at the beginning when I was giving instruction. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll next to the raised hand icon, you'll also see a microphone icon. If it appears orange on your screen, we're not going to be able to hear you. So if you'll click it and you'll turn blue, that will unmute you, and you'll have the floor.
Okay. Mike, I see you left the meeting and
There we go. Finally
there you
got
are.
it. My issue
there we
was
go.
with my
Hey,
mic.
Mike.
I apologize. Yeah. So I'll be
No
real
problem.
quick,
Glad to
guys.
have you.
I know we've been here. So I think having been on the council for 2 terms and involved with the council many years ago, I really appreciate y'all's community's effort and being on the council. I think that that's something that is very commendable, and you are all, especially Sarah, she's been there for the longest in doing this. I know from experience that communicating, getting the input from the citizens is very difficult, and when you get to a hot topic like this is, that's when everybody starts to pay attention. I would also counsel y'all that in this time that we're going through, which is unprecedented, that your communication needs to be doubled in effort with regards to the pandemic, because everybody is distracted about what's going on around them in their world. That being said, we've talked about this issue for years. And, that's all I'll leave right now. I don't think that the 503 Bell is a good spot for it. I think that somewhere on Bee Cave Road would be better. And that's all I'll leave right now. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Amber, would you mind checking to see if Marnie is having a little more success with her mic?
Okay, it looks like she's still muted on her end.
She's unable to join in. It seems like there's an issue people are having when they're trying to join from phones, don't have the app. When trying to use just the internet to join from a phone, it doesn't seem to allow you to unmute yourself. I think she's going to send me some questions or maybe a statement or something that we can either distribute to council or read if y'all would like.
Okay. Let's tell you what, while we wait for that, do we have other hands raised, Amber?
We don't. And sometimes it might be just easier to call in on the phone number. If you're not able to get your phone Safari working. Okay, here's some hands. Brooke Brown, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, Brooke.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As y'all probably know, council members, I have filed some written comments, and in the written comments, I have suggested that the council issue an RFP for proposals to address the space needs of the city. In the discussion this evening, both Amy and Wendy, y'all raised several times the thought that in order to evaluate 503 Bell, you're going to have to hire consultants to do that work, to figure out if it can meet the city's needs. And one of the things that I have seen in my former law practice working with various kinds of public entities is that when you identify what you need, that being we need X number of additional space for city offices and a police department, and then put out an RFP, the people responding to that RFP will do most of that work for you, and they do it for free in hopes that they'll get the project. So the hard work is defining what you want, and then you put it out and you get competitive bids from people, and they'll have the creativity and the expertise because this is what they do. And so I would really encourage you to take a step back and even have a discussion. They may have a builder that knows how this property could be used better. But that property owner and that builder can get together and make a proposal to the city so that you're not trying to have to evaluate as if you were to be the builder what the best options are for getting that property. And it doesn't take a lot of time. And in today's economy, you're going to have people who are looking for paying clients like a city that will be happy. I would expect you're going to get several proposals that will help you sort through, is it more cost effective to do this at the existing location or somewhere else? You know, there are property owners that own property within the existing commercial and other non-residential zoned property in the city that you may not be aware of or may not know, or that may not have thought about the opportunity that now presents itself. And so I would very strongly encourage you to take a step back, do the work to define the kind of space you're looking for, and then ask for competitive bids. And that's the comment I have for you. And thank you for your time in front of the city. I know it's an act of love and of dedication.
Thank you, Brooke, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us again, share your comments. Amber, do we have anyone else, or perhaps the comments from Marnie have made it over?
John Hinton has his hand raised. John, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, am I on?
Yes, sir. Hi, John.
Okay.
Glad to have you.
Hello, thank you. Just a real short comment. I appreciate very much the problem you have now with this potential contract that you have to purchase the Vail property without having gone through all of the steps that you'd like to do. But I think that if you purchase the property now, it actually becomes a self-fulfilling situation. And I don't know if that's called mission creep or not, but I would just guard against deciding to buy that property without having gone through all of this analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Amber, who do we have up next?
Christian Prospect. I hope I said your last name right. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. I just have a question more than a comment, and I'm just kind of new to this, first time that I'm attending the city hall meeting. But so what are the next steps? Because some people were against it, and those were pretty convincing and loud, but there are some of them who are for it. And do we get a chance as residents to vote? Or does this have a chance even to die before even you get more information that we all agree we need? So that's all I have. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you very much for joining us, especially on your first time. Hopefully it's far from your last time for joining us. In short, we have entered into an option period on a purchase contract. We have until as a city, we have until June 17th before our escrow money goes hard, and at that point, we have until from the June 17th until June 31st to either execute the contract or terminate. We can choose to terminate at any time before that, June 17th. It's my understanding that the City Council intends to take this out for a final decision on June 15th at our City Council meeting. And I'll let Ashley tell me what time that's going to be, tell us what time that's going to be. Have we set a time for that already?
It'll be at 6 o'clock.
At 6 o'clock on June 15th.
It's July, Mayor.
July.
You've said June instead of July for each of those dates.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, guys, sorry, my apologies. Not June, July. So July 15th is when council will take this up. July 17th is when the escrow monies or go hard, and then we have got to fulfill the contract one way or another by July 31st. I suspect strongly that we'll have a definitive answer, whether it be up or down, at our July 15th meeting at 6 p.m. And with regards to comments, a direct vote from the people, unfortunately, that's not exactly how this works. What we do is there are 5 members of our City Council, 5 folks on the dais, Sarah Hudson, Amy Patillo, Wendy Hundley, Gavin Massagill, and Buck Shapiro. Those are your elected representatives. And what these fine 5 folks do is try to gauge citizen support or opposition before entering a vote up or down. On rare occasion, we'll see maybe an abstention of somebody, or maybe a pause if somebody doesn't have enough information or doesn't feel compelled to vote one way or the other. I hope that's helpful information. I would invite you to give me a call or shoot me an email if I can be helpful in any form or fashion. Amber and Ashley are pros at this as well, and I know they'd be happy to help walk you through the process. Again, thanks for joining us. I hope it's not I hope it's not an uncommon occurrence. Amber, do we have any other hand trades?
Gary Grossenbacher, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Gary.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. This got started. There was representations made by members of the council that there was widespread community support for this, and that turned out to not be true. And there's no dispute that this is extremely controversial, and the overwhelming number of affected neighbors are against this. And that's probably why it started out creating a lot of anger about this. And now I'm hearing that there's representations being made that the Planning and Zoning Commission, who was vested with the responsibility of looking at this and making a decision, made the decision because they didn't have enough information, and therefore that's why they voted against it. Well, I listened to them, and that's not what they said. They said, we can't in good conscience go forward with this because there's overwhelming opposition to it by the affected neighbors. They didn't say anything about we didn't have enough information. So more misrepresentations causes more community anger. That's not what they said. And now we're trying to use this we don't have enough information falsehood to support dropping $1.2 million to buy the property so that we can evaluate it. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And even worse, the mission creep, once it's done, then it's going to be pushed forward, is going to snowball on us. And it just, you know, the people don't want this. Why waste our time on something that doesn't have community support? And let's find a solution that brings the community together instead of one that's just going to cause rancor and anger and drive everybody apart. Dropping $1.2 million and then saying, don't worry about it because we are these savvy real estate investors, and don't worry, we'll be able to flip this property and make a big profit on it. Well, that property is an albatross that Mr. Williams apparently can't get rid of, and he's trying to dump it on the city for what he can get for it. And then we're going to be stuck with it, and you know, somebody's appraisal is somebody's opinion. Let's see what somebody really wants to pay for it. That thing's been for sale forever, and nobody wants it. And now the city's going to come in and pay all this money for it and say, don't worry about it. We're savvy real estate investors. We'll flip it for a profit. So we can go ahead and commit ourselves to buying this thing when we have no exit strategy and no support for doing with it what's being proposed. Thank you.
Who has said that they're savvy real estate investors and that they were going to flip it? Who said
Well,
that?
I mean, the proposal is the proposal is, don't worry, because we're going to get an appraisal and we're going to buy this, and it's going to all work out great because we're going to do all these studies and spend all this money. But, you know, if it doesn't work out, don't worry, because we'll just be able to sell the property at a big profit to the city. And so it's, there's a no risk, it's a no risk proposition. And,
Well,
and I don't believe that.
I was just wondering, because you just chastised us for saying certain representations that you believed were not true. And so now you're saying that we've said that we're savvy real estate investors and going to flip the property. So I was just wondering who had said that.
Well, isn't there the proposal on the table now that even if the zoning is not approved, we should go ahead and spend $1.2 million on the property, and that it's not going to cost the city any money, because then we can go do all these studies, and we can figure out the traffic, and we can go to the city and get all the approvals to change the Alonzo, and we can spend all this study money. And then if it turns out, if it's not such a great idea after all, we'll just be able to turn around and sell the property at a profit. And so it's a no risk proposition, and we should just go ahead and buy it, because it's a win-win, because we're going to make money off of it.
Well, my point was, you talk about planning and zoning and a representation of words that they had said, and your point was they never said those words. That's a falsehood. And so I'm just wondering who on the council has said that we're savvy real estate investors and we're going to flip the property, because I've never heard anyone say that.
Well, isn't the proposal is the proposal not on the table that if there's not, even if we don't have planning and zoning, so there's no authorization to actually use the property by the city, we should still go ahead and buy it on the hope that we can then go spend a whole bunch of money doing the study. Rather than doing the study beforehand, we should buy the property and do the study afterwards, and then it's a no risk proposition because we'll be able to sell it later. Isn't that the proposal that's on the table?
My point is, if you're going to have issue with and call certain things falsehoods that the planning and zoning may or may not have said, and I believe that you're probably correct on your specific point, but then I think you need to be careful in your representations on things that this council has said that I've never heard any of us say. And that's my
Well, I've asked you the question several times and I'm not getting an answer. Isn't there a proposal on the table to buy the property, even if the zoning's not changed? And the support for that is that don't worry about it. We'll be able to sell it at a profit later if it turns out that we don't want to go through with the idea of putting a police station there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I understand. A proposal is on the table. Buy the property now and don't worry about it, because we'll be able to sell it later, and it's a no risk. That's not the proposal on the table?
It is an option on the table, but I've never heard
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Well, and all I'm saying is that no one has actually said the words that you're representing that we have said.
Okay. But regardless of the words,
I'm your no vote. So I mean,
yeah, I understand, and I don't want to get in a crosswise with you. But the question is, isn't that on the table? Is the idea is we should buy the property, and it's not a risky situation to drop $1.2 million on this, because we'll be able to sell this later to somebody else for more than we're paying for it. That's my understanding of what you guys, or not you, but some people on the council are urging to buy the property even without the zoning, because they'll be able to sell it later at a profit.
And I'll let other council members speak to those specifics. My understanding is the discussion that's being had is whether or not, and I personally don't agree with buying it before we zone it. I don't agree with that approach. But I'll let other council members speak to their rationale behind it. But I've never, I don't think arbitrage is something that's on anyone's mind. I think a short-term solution, again, that I'm not supportive of, but in out of respect to my colleagues, I don't think that their rationale is anything other than trying to look at both short and long-term solutions. It is not real estate speculation. So that's my only point.
I can speak to that, Gavin.
Go ahead, Amy.
So as to the point of whether, I believe it probably is directed at Councilmember Henley, made false representations about what was stated at Planning and Zoning. I didn't take exact notes on what was said, but I do recall from listening to that meeting that there was one commissioner who indicated that he wished that there had been an evaluation of whether there were some potential short-term uses for the property. And I would classify that as one example of some comments that were made by Planning and Zoning that would fall under the category of wishing there was additional information. I also heard the same thing Mr. Grossenbeck said, that there were other commission members who indicated that they were voting because of the community response. So I believe both can be true without one needing to be stated as being a false representation of a meeting. The other thing I would say is that the question has come up to the city of whether we rezoned it or didn't rezone it before we purchased it. What if we find out after we own it that there are some issues that were not foreseen that would keep it from being suitable for use as a police station? What would happen then? That question has come up both in the context of would there be limitations on other uses that might happen? And it has also come up in the context of could the city sell the property? And so I believe that the conversations that we've had related to answering the question of what happens, whether it's rezoned first or not, and we own it, and then we decide that it's not feasible for use as a police station, what would happen? And our legal counsel has explained to us that what would happen is we would take the costs that we put into the property. We would also take any expenses that we spent in assessing the property, and that would be set as the initial starting price, and it would go up on auction. And I consider that to be a reasonable question that someone who is making a purchase would make, and not as a strategy to commit arbitrage, which I've also been told that is something that people think we're doing. That is not it. It is a body of people who are trying to ask reasonable business questions about how our tax resources are going to be used. And so that's my answer to it. Other people may have other answers, but I appreciate the intensity of comment. I appreciate the questions, but I agree with Gavin that calling us savvy real estate investors is not the type of conversation that I think gets us to a community-oriented solution. I own one property, and so I wouldn't classify myself as that. And I'm trying to ask thoughtful questions. And one of my thoughtful questions was, what happens if we purchase a property as a city and then end up needing to sell it?
Well, my point is, why buy it in the first place if there's so much community opposition to it?
Well, and that's a choice that we're going to make as a council. And I appreciate that question and understand that it is a question that there are many people who have commented that share with you in that position.
I would just say, having been directed as the person that is being commented about, that there have been comments made on the P&Z that this could be a stopgap. That was made by a commission member on Planning and Zoning, and there were, like Councilmember Patillo said, just some discussion about how they wish that there would have been some other options. And so I do think that they voted on the zoning issue based on the information they had and the public feedback that they had, but that was not voting on the purchase of the property. There weren't other options given. They were put forth to vote on the zoning issue, And my comment was that they had a very thoughtful conversation. And that's what I appreciate about our community. And I want to also say that to Mr. Sparks, that I feel like his comments have been very thoughtful, and that his dealings with getting the word out to his neighbors and spreading information and getting a petition together have been very thoughtful. And I don't in any way mean to say that the people who have signed that petition don't care about the issues. And so if it's hard sometimes to communicate on a video chat meeting and say exactly what you mean, but I really appreciate the manner in which Mr. Sparks has operated, how he's commented on issues, how he's informed neighbors, and I appreciate everyone who's written in individually and people who have signed on to the petition. And I don't think that anyone would just put their name on a petition without being informed of the facts. And I think Mr. Sparks actually did a very good job laying out his arguments. So I apologize if there was any offense to you at all, Mr. Sparks, for how I phrased that. And that is not, I did not mean to offend you, and I apologize to anyone who signed the petition who may have felt that way.
Thank you, everybody. Obviously, a little bit over the 3 minutes, but I appreciate the conversation and talking points. Amber, do we have anybody else that is signed up for or has their hand raised for public comment?
William Teason. William, I just unmuted you.
Hey, William, we can't hear you. You may still need to unmute on your side.
Might be something wrong with his mic. Okay, we'll work on that.
We'll go back around if he wants to.
Yeah, Dr. Hauser, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify a couple of things. Thanks y'all for listening again. But I did get notification of the meeting tonight in a lot of different modalities, and I appreciate that. In May, the application for zoning was signed on May 13th. I understand an option to buy the property was done on May 19th. I accidentally heard about this from my neighbor Grant Sparks on May 8th and talked to the mayor for the first time May 9th. And may just reflect the fact that as this thing rolled out, a lot of people didn't really have a lot of notification. Now that we've been going to meetings and trying to educate ourselves and learn about this, there are obviously lots of issues that are out there that are going to impact your decisions. First of all, Grant Sparks has collected 143 signatures from 88 households. And the majority of homes that are within 200 feet of this home, 503 Vale, are opposed. One thing that Amy mentioned earlier was, working on developing the commercial corridor and, taking your time and doing your homework and to deal with that. And I feel like zoning kind of needs the same thing. And we've spent a lot of time with zoning. I think your committee, felt for whatever reason that this was not something that they felt was a good idea after going through all the information. One of the things that y'all brought up again tonight was this was supposed to be a police station, but it sounds like it's moved into, well, maybe it could be redesigned for something else, or maybe it could be a different storage facility. And those are the very things that I think the neighbors don't want to see happen to a piece of property 200 feet from our homes. Something that Brooke Brown brought up that I think is just really important is this is a 24/7 operation. So a police operation is 24/7. It may be quiet sometimes a day, but you have police cars in and out of there. You advertise on your Rollingwood website that you have a 24/7 available police force, and this will be their home. And so that's a whole different animal in terms of sticking that in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Your city hall right now, the way it's located, is really in a different location and different kind of footprint. When I first had the opportunity and pleasure to speak to Wendy months ago, after taking a lot of time to talk to me, one of the things you told me, Wendy, was that y'all can make City Hall happen if you really have to do it. And I'm, like everybody else, sort of asking, can we relook at the assessment? Do we need another assessment? Can we look at the commercial area on Bee Caves Road in Rollingwood, where there's a lot more development? That's an area where you could do temporary storage, and it's not that expensive, from what I understand, $5,000 to $10,000 a month. And I'm just throwing that out there, but it's not $1.2 million. That is the busiest part of Rollingwood, that on the street that we have. And the last thing I want to say before we run out of time here is a rezoning that benefits a private party but appears to be contrary to the public interest may be considered contract zoning. And so the majority of the neighbors in this area really don't want this piece of property developed into anything that's non-residential. And the issues with the park, the police have been handling the events just fine. We've been here for a long time and watched it. It's done even better now than it has been in the past. And so we don't feel like that's a urgent issue. New space, larger space, and drainage seem to be the urgent issues that the city needs to address and hopefully spend their money on. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Hauser.
Thank you, Dr.
Amber, who do we have up next?
Okay, William said no big deal. William, if you would like to email in your comments or participate next month, we'll make sure we get your comments issued. I'm sorry you couldn't participate tonight.
That's a good, Amber, if I could, sorry to interrupt you, but that is a good point. If I could just make sure everyone's aware that there will be opportunity, again, to comment next month. Or say next month, sorry, the next city council meeting, which is July, not June 15th, July 15th at 6 p.m. Amber?
Jack Holland has his hand raised again. Do you wish to recognize him?
Jack, I got chastised last time. I was allowing folks to make multiple comments. In an attempt to be respectful of folks' time, I would encourage you to do two things. Email your comments over to us, contact the council members directly, and then, as I mentioned before, we'll have another opportunity for comment on July 15th. I hope you don't take too much offense to that. Amber, do we have anyone else who hasn't had an opportunity to speak?
The last one is Marty Fitzgerald. I'm sorry, Marty, you weren't able to participate. Please submit your comments. And if y'all want to do a practice with Ashley or myself or both, we're happy to do that. Just give us a call and we can schedule a time to make sure you're connected and can participate. But go ahead and email your comments in, and then make sure you can participate at the July 15th meeting. We'll get those comments out.
Okay.
And that's everybody, Mayor.
Okay. Sorry, did Gavin or was somebody else speaking? My camera went out for a second.
I wasn't. I have a comment, but go ahead and do whatever you're going to do.
Oh, you're welcome to make your comments now.
I didn't know what was next.
So there's nothing else on the agenda. And I'll tell you what, in that case, considering that there's nobody else waiting, now I feel awful for asking Jack to stand by. If no one's opposed, I wouldn't mind Jack coming back on for another 3 minutes, if he's still there.
He is. Let me unmute him.
He is?
Yes. Jack, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the earlier exchange between obviously Gavin and Wendy and Gary Grossenbacher about the actually, buying the property and what happens if the city does not proceed to use it. I think perhaps some of the reason why that is out there is, I mentioned this to Mrs. Huntley in an email, there is the Statesman article, which, it says if the city purchases the property but doesn't use it, the city could auction the property off at a reserve price, possibly earning money due to the tract's low purchase price. And Mrs. Huntley did reply to me, so I appreciate her response to that. So I just wanted to just put out why I think that is, being spoken about. I would also like to say I appreciate Amy for explaining that basically the plan would be take the 1.2 million, add on the cost, what the city has incurred, and then make that a reserve price. Let's just say, for example's sake, that was 100 grand on top. If the reserve price was 1.3, like I mentioned when I earlier spoke, I am a full-time real estate investor. I believe the current record for a price for a lot in Rollingwood is 1.575 million. That's for a lot at 0.4 acres on Park Hills Drive. Now, if you're going to offer that lot, which is 0.5, half an acre, with considerable city views and considerably closer to Zilker Park, I'd bet my hat that you're going to get offers well in excess of $1.3 million. So I guess my point is, whether you like it or not, you may well be in a position where you get offers of $1.6, $1.7 million, which is probably around the current asking price for that lot. Because it would be a teardown. Like I said, I know that property. But at 1.6, 1.7, that may well make sense to a lot of property developers in this city. In which case now the city has got a profit. You've made 400,000. That's, like I said, do we really want the city council to be going down a route of being real estate investors? But my final point is, how is Gary Keller going to think about that? He paid 1.95. He sells it to you guys for 1.2 to see you put it on the market a few months later for 1.6, 1.7. There's an awful lot kind of complicated with that situation. I can't speak for him, of course, but it's a huge discount, and I get it. 750,000 for someone that's held the property for just over a year. That's a huge discount. But like I said, I didn't want to raise that. I think whether you like it or not, if you put it on for 1.3, you will make a profit. That's the current market where it is. Yeah.
Jack, sorry to interrupt you, but we've hit the 3-minute mark.
Okay, thanks again.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, and again, please don't hesitate. I know you've sent comments in before. Please don't hesitate to shy away from sending those in again, and do feel free to join us again on July 15th at 6 p.m. Amber, assuming nobody else's hands up, I'm going to go ahead and get the floor to Gavin and let Gavin have his comment.
Nobody else has their hand up.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, and thanks everyone for having this work session tonight. Thank you, Amy, for laying out a robust agenda for us that I think allowed us to get some of those other important facts and some of the history of everything that we've been dealing with out on the table. And I think it's great for the community to have a better understanding of some of those other issues. And I look forward to hopefully all of them working with us in the future to solve all of these problems, especially when it comes to facilities. I just wanted to let my council colleagues know that my intent on the 15th will be when we get to these 2 agenda items to make a motion to table both of those. And so I didn't want you to be surprised by that because I plan on doing that right off the bat. So I just wanted you to know that so you have time to think about it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Gavin.
Can I make one question about that, Gavin?
Yes, ma'am.
We might want a legal review about what the effect of tabling would be on whether that triggers the termination agreement in the contract or not.
That's fair. And I said I was maybe being overly broad with a motion to table. It perhaps will be a motion to deny. So
thank you
but
for that clarification.
Good counsel, and I will seek counsel.
Okay. Great. Council, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I just wanted to make a quick question or quick comment, because I'm thinking that our meeting on the 15th, starting at 6 o'clock, is actually a budget workshop. Is that not right? From 6 until 7? And so
It is,
that,
but I don't think it's a good habit to let our very concerned constituency not pay attention to how we're setting our budget. So I'd love for them to tune in for that.
I understand that, but I also think that it would be important for us to be clear on what the schedule is going to be so that they are aware that there's an hour of budget workshop before we actually start up the regular agenda so that they can plan accordingly.
That is a fair distinction, and for the folks that are still tuned in, you've heard a lot about it today. It's critically important for the community to be involved at large. There was a comment made earlier with regard to folks that seem to tune in when it impacts them or it's perceived to impact them. Guys, I can tell you, it's your tax money. Setting a budget impacts you. Please tune in at 6 if your schedule doesn't allow you to be there for our budget workshop and help get an idea of how this council, led by Gavin and our great department heads, are actually saving money on this upcoming budget cycle. I think it's critically important information for us all to have. In any case, Sarah, thank you very much for the clarification. The official meeting, you're correct, does start at 7. I hope to see everybody there at 6. Council, do we have other comments?
No, but I appreciate you laying out the agenda also, Amy. I'd like to, I appreciate that we had this work session and everybody came, and I hope that we have triggered more community discussion and educated ourselves and people, and that people see that we do listen and care about the comments that come in, and it does help to weight our decisions. And I hope that people continue to participate.
Great.
Thanks, Wendy. And I just appreciate y'all taking your time again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent job. Okay, well, if there is nothing else, Council, we have moved through our 2 agenda items, and we have already closed out our public hearing. That's it for the agenda. If we want to adjourn this workshop.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Sarah?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Wendy?
Aye.
Gavin?
Aye.
Great. Again, thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Take care of yourselves and be careful. I probably don't need to underscore. Wear your masks, socially distance, wash your hands, be thoughtful and respectful. All right, guys. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks, Mayor.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.